Right, let's go. Excellent. So it's recording now. Okay, so it's lovely to meet you, Karen. Whereabouts are you at the moment? Are you in the States or Canada?
Canada, just outside Toronto.
Oh, lovely, lovely. So the way that I usually like to start these sessions is just asking what inspired your trip to Italy? Was there an inspiration in your past? Maybe someone else has been to Italy. You always wanted to go.
Certainly my husband and I had planned, excuse me, a trip mm, maybe 15 years ago. And it was a 3 week seeing not all of, but various regions of Italy, largely a bus tour. And 2 weeks before we were due to leave, they canceled the trip. There wasn't enough interest.
Okay, yeah.
So this is our 25th anniversary coming up this year. So we wanted to do the trip or something similar to what we had planned before.
Well, congratulations. Going to Italy is always a special time, but when it's for a celebration, an anniversary, it's extra special. So I'm glad that I can help. So um with your trip, you said you're going for 2 weeks, is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Lovely. And you're looking to base yourself in Rome and Venice?
correct. So we have a friend that works for the embassy in Vienna.
Okay, yep.
So we're actually doing the three cities. We're doing a week in Rome, about 3 nights, maybe 4 nights in Venice, and then the rest in Vienna.
Okay, lovely. I think you've done a really good thing with allowing enough time in Rome and then also allowing yourself enough time that you're not bouncing between locations. So you'll be able to, I guess, unpack and stay in one city for a period of time, and then when you're ready, move on to the next one. Um,
Yes.
in terms of, so you're traveling with your husband, do you two have any particular interests? Are you crazy about history? Do you love food, culture, anything that's like major focus?
Um, it's a bit diverse. We both enjoy history. My husband is big on World War II. Um, I like landscapes and nature more. We both enjoy food. He's far more of a foodie than I am. Neither of us is especially athletic. But having said that, we've just done a Disney trip where we were 22,000 steps every day. So walking isn't a problem.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not looking to hike the Alps. Like that's
Yes.
not that's not happening.
Yeah, no, so it makes me think, so with Rome, obviously it's quite a big city, it's quite spread out, and the best way to get around Rome is walking. So typically you're doing, 15 to 20,000 steps a day just getting around. So I'm glad you've had practice with Disney. If you can survive a whole day at Disney, I think you'll be fine in Rome.
Oh, good.
And in terms of your travel style, do you prioritize experiences, or do you prefer maybe more comfortable accommodations? What kind of travelers would you describe yourselves as?
I'm going to say we are less on the adventurous side. We certainly like the creature comforts of a nicer hotel. Um, Certainly want to experience the city and the um, attractions. I don't want to just cross them off a list. I want to really um, experience as much as you can.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So, you've already booked your accommodation, is that correct?
that's correct.
Yes. Do you know in Rome which area you're staying in?
By the Spanish Steps.
Okay, lovely. That's a really nice area for, especially in the evenings, you can go for a passeggiata. There's a very long main road that's got shops, takes you down to a piazza, lots of people out. It's a really, really nice area to be in. So that'll be good. And in terms of Venice, whereabouts will you be staying?
I believe we're by St. Mark's, I
Okay,
think.
yep. In the center of things, yep. Perfect.
Yeah, it's the Hotel Santorini.
Okay, yeah. I'm not familiar with this one, but that's no problem. So when do you fly into Rome, sorry? Are you flying in the morning, afternoon?
Uh, it's supposed to be morning. It
Okay,
now seems like they've changed the flight and it's going to be lunchtime, maybe early afternoon.
okay, yeah.
So we were thinking that maybe that first night we would do like a golf cart tour of
Yeah,
town. That seems to be very popular.
actually going to recommend this because in order to save those steps for later in the trip, doing a golf cart tour on your first night is one of the best ways to, I guess, see as much as you can. You'll also be able to do the aperitivo in the evening if you book the evening time one. Um, just I guess skipping ahead. So after this meeting, I'll be able to send you a document. It's going to have all different links to activities and tours that we'll talk about. And then also there'll be certain restaurants as well that we recommend for the two places that you're going. So I will definitely give you the golf cart link for that one. And also you mentioned you wanted to do catacombs as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So you'd be looking for a tour that takes you down underneath Rome and does all the different layers.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a really fun tour actually, because the way that they're typically structured is that they take you back in centuries. So with each layer that you go further down, you get to basically go through a storytelling of time. So if you love history like I do, and I think you do as well, it's a very, very fun tour to do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you'll definitely enjoy that one. In terms of going to the Colosseum, because I assume you're going to Rome, you want to see the Colosseum. Do you have a preference for, I guess, the time of tour? Because you can have shorter tours that take an hour to 2 hours and they just do the Colosseum, or typically longer tours that are 3 to 4 hours and you get to do the Colosseum and the Forum and Palatine Hill.
I would think the latter.
Yeah. Do the
I
full.
know my husband wants to do the underground if it's reopened. I've heard or read people talking about the attic. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah.
And we did briefly look at Gladiator for a day
Okay.
experiences, but it sounds like those are more geared towards kids rather than a
Yeah.
50-year-old man. So we kind of took that off the list begrudgingly, but
No problem, no problem. So just with the Colosseum, currently there are no underground tours. And that is because of various reasons. I believe there is restoration happening at the moment. But if you see anyone advertising underground tours, they will typically be cancelled in the days before the tour because they're not available at the moment. The same goes for the top tier tours that do the very top of the Colosseum. They were open for a period of time earlier this year, I believe, and then they've closed it again. So unfortunately, at the moment, you can only do the arena floor and the kind of midsection of the Colosseum. But if you want to go underground, there is an amazing experience just across from the Colosseum called the Domus Aurea. Have you heard of this one?
okay. I have not.
So yeah, so it's basically hiding in plain sight. It's right across from the Colosseum, but very few people go there. And what it is it's a completely underground former Roman palace. And so you get to go in with a guide. The guide takes you on a tour. It's actually constantly 10 degrees in there because it's underground. So you go through all these different tunnels. There's incredible frescoes on the ceiling, which are thousands of years old that have been preserved. And there's also a virtual reality experience where you get to put on a headset and it basically is like you're walking through this palace as if it was in Roman times. And then you take the headset off and you're in a subterranean Roman ruin, which is very cool.
Wow.
So very few people know or go to this one because it's just not one of those top 10 places that people typically see, and they don't have enough time to see it. But if you're curious about going underground, you will be doing that in the catacombs tours, of course. But if you want another kind of Roman underground experience, this is another really interesting one. So I can give you the
Yes.
details for that.
Yes, please. That sounds
Well,
perfect.
no problem. And then, okay, so we've done Colosseum, catacombs, the Vatican. I'm assuming you want to see the Vatican?
Yes.
Yeah. So would you be happy with a tour that we recommend going early in the morning because it does get quite crowded? I should mention you're going in November, which is a great time because you're not going to be there in the peak of summer. So one, it's going to be more comfortable getting around the city during the day, but also crowds. Rome is always busy, but it's slightly less busy in November. It does get busier in December because Christmas and celebrations, but November is a nice time. In terms of weather, the beginning of November can be quite mild, especially in Rome. And then at some point in like mid-November, the weather just changes and you go from wearing, a t-shirt and a skirt to wearing full winter clothing. So yeah, it happened to me last year. I was there and I was there for 3 weeks, and in the first week it was like summery, and then by the end it was very much winter. So keep that in mind when it comes to your packing. Once you get to Venice and Vienna, definitely you'll be expecting much cooler weather because they are far north, and especially Vienna. But for Rome, you could have a little bit of both. So just check the weather before you go. And see what it's like. With the Vatican tours, I would personally suggest doing a tour that includes both the Vatican museums and the Sistine Chapel, and then takes you through the side door into the Basilica. That way you don't then have to leave the museum and line up for another hour, 2 hours to get into the Basilica. Those tours are typically 3 to 4 hours. Would you be okay with doing that as well?
Yes. We don't want one that is heavily religious. We're not Catholic. We're not big religious people. But we want to kind of appreciate the context and the architecture itself.
Yep. Yep. So most of these tours, they're not really aimed at a religious focus. It's more to do with the art. So the Vatican Museums is the largest collection of art in the entire world. It's absolutely insane. When you go inside, you'll see a very small portion of it, but there are basements and bunkers everywhere with Vatican art. So you'll be seeing the highlights for sure when you're walking through the Vatican. And I'll recommend to a company for you that really they prioritize storytelling. So as you're going on these tours, you get to kind of uncover it one room at a time in a very narrative way, as opposed to spitting facts. That being said, there are two tour companies that I would recommend, but one is much more intimate, so it's maximum 6 people. Whereas the other one is, I think, between 15 to 20 people, so it's a bigger group. Slight variation in price. Is there one that you would prefer over the other, or?
The smaller groups are definitely a preference.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, so I'll make sure to prioritize those. It definitely makes a big difference when you're in these very big crowded places like the Colosseum and the Vatican to still be in a small group and be able to ask your guide questions and have that more close connection. Also, you don't have to wear like the earphones, and they don't have a microphone, so it's a lot more personal. So I'll prioritize that one for you.
Thank you.
Excellent. And let me just check. So you want to go inside the Pantheon as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So with the Pantheon, there's a new ticketing system that came in this year. It's very easy. You just book a timed entrance. Previously it was free and you just got to walk in. But now you just book a timed entrance and make sure you're there at that time. So I can give you the links for that as well. Food tour. You mentioned that you would be interested in food. So
Yes.
yeah. So we've actually got a fantastic food tour, which is, have you heard of the Trastevere area?
No.
No, so this is a very popular foodie area on the opposite sides of the river from the center of Rome. And I will recommend you to go there and wander around and explore. But for your food tour, I'm going to recommend that you do one in an area called Testaccio. And that is just across the river from Trastevere. but it is a much more local experience. It doesn't have the same amount of tourists that you get in Trastevere. And the guy that we have leading the tours there, Nazim, is absolutely wonderful. He's a local, he's a former chef, knows everything there is to know about Roman food. So for a very authentic, wonderful night in Rome, it'll be a very memorable night. I can give you that one as well.
Okay. And sorry, what was the other area that you said? He
Trastevere?
does.
Oh,
Yes.
so
How do you
Testaccio.
Testaccio is where he is, and
Yep.
the other. How do you spell the other area?
Trastevere.
Yes.
I'll just confirm the spelling. So it is Trastevere.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a good area to explore, but do
Yeah.
the actual food tour and the
And
other one.
Testaccio. Yeah. You'll be able to compare actually as you're walking around Trastevere. You'll notice there's a lot more people, a lot more things going on. Whereas Testaccio, you walk around and it's predominantly locals just going about their daily life. So
Okay.
this is the wonderful thing about you having such a long period, a good amount of time in Rome, is that you're going to get the chance to see so much more than most people do. And like you said before, you'll get a feel for a city as opposed to just ticking things off. So that's good. Okay. You said you want to do 2-day trips to
Yes.
Pompeii and to Tuscany.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so with these day trips, I assume, are you happy to do tours? You don't want to try and DIY it yourself?
Correct. Tour, please.
Okay, excellent. I think when you're on holidays and you've got limited amount of time, it can become way too stressful to try and do it all yourself. So if you're happy to do tours, that's fantastic. Typically, these day tours are going to be quite long, between 10 to 12 hours. So you usually wake up and meet your guide somewhere around about 7, 8 in the morning, and then you don't return to Rome until 7, 8 p.m. in the evening.
Okay.
So that's one thing to keep in mind. So for instance, when it comes to scheduling the day prior to the day trip, maybe don't do a very late night, and the day after, make it a bit more slow pace or allow yourself a slower morning so that your body has time to kind of catch up. But in the document I'll give you a kind of rough itinerary idea so you can work off that when it comes to putting it together. But in terms of Pompeii, so there's a couple of different combinations you can do. So you can do Pompeii and the Amalfi Coast. You can do Pompeii and Herculaneum, which is another site that was also devastated by Vesuvius. Or you can do Pompeii and Naples, or you can do Pompeii and a wine tasting on Mount Vesuvius.
Wow, that's a lot of options.
There is a lot. Is there one that sticks out to you as something you'd be more interested in, or?
So originally we had looked at a Pompeii and Positano, I think is the town.
Yeah.
However, we're hearing from a lot of people that Positano is very steep. And I'm a little challenged walking up steep hills. And you really only have enough time to walk into town, have a quick bite, and then you've got to come back out. So, kind of what's the point? You don't get to really enjoy the city. Um, I'd like to see the Amalfi Coast, but I don't necessarily, I'm not going to shop. I just want to see what those towns are like because it sounds like such a different region in appearance.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so with these tours, you do get very limited time. So the drive between Rome to Pompeii typically takes about 2 hours in itself. You will be in a very comfortable air-conditioned either minivan or bus, depending on the size tour that you pick. But so typically you'll do 2 hours drive to Pompeii, where you'll meet a guide. You'll have a guided tour that is between 1.5 to 2 hours. Then you'll get back on the bus. And if you're going to the Amalfi Coast, you'll then continue down to the Amalfi Coast. I believe you stop in either 1 or 2 towns, again, depending on the tour that you choose. And it is very limited time. So, it's enough time to snap some photos and do some souvenir shopping, maybe get yourself a gelato. But it is, of course, a beautiful coastline. And it's very popular for a reason. And if you're on the bus, you do also get to see the coastline from the bus as well. I should ask, do either of you or your husband have motion sickness when it comes to windy roads? Or okay, good.
No.
No, that's good. I get very unwell on windy roads, so I was like, better check that one. So if that's something you're interested in, I can definitely give you that one. Would you also like the one with the wine tasting, or you definitely want to stick with the Pompeii Amalfi Coast combination?
I'm really torn, to be honest.
Yep.
I've heard some things about Herculean, and I'm wondering if that's a better combination, doing the two, because it sounds like they're very different. They're not as redundant as they sound.
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of think maybe that's a good option. Um, the wine tasting on Vesuvius would definitely appeal to my husband, but I don't know how redundant that would be to um, Tuscany. So,
So
what are your
if
thoughts?
so, I think if you're wanting to maximize the different kinds of experiences you can have, for instance, you have the city of Rome, you have the ancient side of Pompeii, and the coast of Amalfi Coast, you're getting, 3 different things. Herculaneum is amazing. It is a much better preserved version of Pompeii with a quarter of the tourists, but it is also a similar kind of ancient site. So you don't get the same difference between the archaeological site and then the coast per se. And the wine tasting, I would say if you didn't want to do Tuscany and you wanted to have the wine tasting Pompeii in the same day, that would be a good combination. But since you do want to do a wine tasting day trip in Tuscany, maybe you don't need to do that in the Pompeii. So I would say probably, since you have limited time and maybe you don't know when you're going to come back to Italy in the future, perhaps do the Pompeii Amalfi Coast one, just so that you get to see them. And when you have that bit like a taste tester, you can then decide, okay, I want to come back here and spend more time, or hey, I'm glad I came and I saw this and I know what it's like now. So
Okay.
yeah, I would probably recommend the Pompeii Amalfi Coast for you. So I'll give you a link for that one.
Perfect.
And then in terms of Tuscany, I don't know if you've looked into them much, but there are definitely winery tours that will take you from Rome. And they'll typically take you to the Val d'Occia region, which is in the south of Tuscany, which is a beautiful region. So you'll have a wonderful time driving through the scenery there. Typically, they will do a morning visit to a hilltop town, either Montepulcione or Pienza. Then you'll do a lunchtime, like sit down meal lunch with wine tasting. And then you go to another town in the afternoon, and then you make your way back to back to Rome, sorry. But like I said, they're both going to be very, very big, long days, but you are going to be sitting for most of them. And I will make sure when I put your suggested itinerary in that we keep those days quite far away from each other, so that you have time to recover in between. But yeah, if that sounds like a good plan, do you have any other questions in relation to Rome specifically, how to get around, or?
Would you recommend, and I know you're going to put an itinerary together for us, but should we be looking at booking tours morning and afternoon, or do you typically do one booked tour and then just explore in the afternoon and early evening?
Yeah, so I think it depends on where you are in the city. So I like to group things together so that you're not going from one place across and all over. So for instance, if you wanted to do the Colosseum and the Domus Aurea, I would put those two together because they are very close. But typically I would recommend only doing one activity, like an organized tour a day. or having something in the morning, a gap in between, and then doing something in the evening, like a food tour.
Okay.
That being said, you do want to allow yourself time to just wander and explore. So don't overpack your schedule with tours. I think the good thing is I had a quick look at how many days you have, and I think even with all the tours that I've mentioned, you will still have time to explore. And you'll have typically something in the morning or the afternoon, and then vice versa will be free to just to wander around. So I think that's the best way to balance it, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yep. And
Okay.
then we had read that more so with Venice, but it sounds like um, sites are closed on Sundays, possibly on Mondays. Is that something we need to watch for?
Yeah, so I will make note of the specific places that you're going. And for instance, on a Wednesday, you can't access the little side door in the Vatican that takes you into the Basilica because they have a morning mass on Wednesday. A lot of sites in Rome are typically closed on Monday, but I'll make sure to include that in, there's a little note section at the bottom for each of your destinations, just the key ones, because yeah, you don't want to be planning to go somewhere and then obviously it's closed. But you can check these things online in advance, but I'll make sure to, I guess, double check them for you.
Okay.
So you won't have to worry about that.
Okay. And then if we do a golf cart tour the Saturday night when we arrive, is that redundant to the hop on, hop off bus?
Yes, you won't need to do the bus.
Okay.
Because with the bus, typically I find that it takes you around the city, not so much into all the nooks and crannies, because they're quite large, obviously, so they can only really access the main roads. Whereas with a golf cart, you will be driven basically into the tiny alleyways and streets, and you'll get much closer to the sites. Also with the golf cart tours, they stop and you're able to get off. So they'll make a stop near the Trevi Fountain. You get to see the Trevi Fountain. They'll make a stop near the Pantheon. You can take photos in front of the Pantheon. So if you're doing the golf cart tour, then no, you don't need to do the hop on, hop off bus.
Okay. And um something just triggered with me. Hold on here. Oh,
No?
the fountains. It sounds like Rome is working its way through revitalizing all of the fountains for the Jubilee.
Yeah.
Um, does that, like, are they closed for a long period of time, or is it like each fountain's a couple of weeks and it
So
is what it is?
it's a bit unknown at the moment. So you may have heard, so Piazza Navona, which is a big long piazza in Rome, with beautiful fountains, they've been covered up. Part of the Pantheon has been covered up. There's a few other key places as well. And that's all been during the summertime. With Italy, things don't typically happen very quickly, but there is no given time period of how long it may be. Fingers crossed. So the Jubilee celebrations actually start in December. So hopefully by November they will have finished most of it and it will be away. But yeah, there's no real way to tell, unfortunately.
Okay. Would you suspect then that crowds would be less in November because those folks are typically going to wait till December for the Jubilee celebrations?
I think Italy and Rome is busy all year round, especially now. I do think that November is one of the quieter months.
Okay.
So typically in my experience, January, Feb, and a little bit of March, and November are the quietest months. As I mentioned before, December, you start to get Christmas happening, and then basically between mid-March to the end of October, it's considered high season these days. So I think you've picked a really good time to go, and I wouldn't be too worried about crowds, especially at that time of year. The good thing is that Rome is quite large and quite spread out. So even if you're in a crowded area like the Colosseum or the Vatican, it's very easy to get away from the crowds and explore somewhere else. Where that's more of a challenge is Venice, for example, because it's much more compact. Yeah, I'll talk about Venice once we get there. But yeah, any other questions for Rome?
Nope, that does me for Rome, I think.
Fabulous. So we'll move on to Venice now. So you're taking a direct train, I assume, from Rome to Venice?
That's correct.
Fabulous. All right. So do you know what time you're getting into Venice? Is it afternoon, evening?
Early afternoon. We're looking at the 10:35 out of Rome, which gets us into Venice at 2:34.
Okay, perfect. Amazing. Okay, so you've got 3 nights in Venice, so 2 full days. And the good thing is that Venice is, as I mentioned, smaller than Rome, so you can definitely see a lot in those 2 days. In terms of your first evening, I would probably suggest just arriving, checking into your accommodation, maybe go for a gondola ride, as you do when you're in Venice. Something to note about them is that you don't have to make a booking. You can just show up and there's gondoliers in all the different canals. So when you find one that you like, you can just hop on board. I do think, well, in my personal experience, I like to have a bit of a chat with the gondolier beforehand to decide if they have, the right kind of attitude. So that makes for a more enjoyable experience when they're a bit more open. They might tell you things about the city as you're going around, whereas some can be a lot more quieter and will just row you. So it depends what experience you want. But if you want to do something that evening, I can recommend a food tour for Venice, which is run by a local lady. And it takes you into all the hidden spots that you probably wouldn't get to on your own. So if that's something you'd like.
Yes.
Okay, fabulous.
The
And
one
then,
the one the one caveat on that,
yeah,
I'm not huge on seafood. I know Venice is going to be a challenge for me.
yeah.
So if she includes some places that aren't just fish, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Typically when you do any kind of food tour, you'll get asked in advance, does anyone have any allergies or things that they don't like? So you can definitely do that. I would even say if you're nervous about it, reaching out in advance, send an email maybe and ask, what is the ratio of fish to other dishes?
Okay.
Because you don't want to book a tour and then find out that it was 80% fish and you didn't get to try anything except for, the Aperol spritz.
Okay.
I would recommend, and thank you for telling me about that because I will take note of that when giving restaurant recommendations for Rome and particularly Venice. I will steer clear of only seafood restaurants. But does your husband enjoy seafood?
He does very much.
Okay, so I'll look for ones that have a combination of seafood and non-seafood options. And then in terms of your first full day in Venice, was there anything that you wanted to see or was kind of a must-do in Venice?
We did have a list. Don't have it handy. I know I wanted to see wander through Rialto Market. I know I wanted to kind of do the main circuit of St. Mark's.
Yeah.
Um, we want to try and find I don't think it's a library from Indiana Jones that he was in. You probably don't know the scene that I'm talking about. But we want to hunt that out. I want to
Okay.
hunt out the Banksy that's in Vienna, in Venice.
Yeah.
Standard tourist stuff with just a couple of other things. I wasn't sure about going over to is it Borno?
No.
Yeah, the island.
No. Yeah.
With
Yeah.
the glass blowing. Wasn't sure about that, if that was worth a day.
Yeah, so there's the two islands. So you've got Murano, which is a bit closer to Venice. That's where the glass blowing is. And then you've got Burano, which is a little bit further. And that's where they have all the very colorful houses. I don't know if you've seen those ones. Yeah.
Yes, I've seen pictures.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you can do them as a tour. Otherwise, you can also do them on your own. So with Venice, do you know about the vaporettos? They're like the
Nope.
buses. Okay. So as you would have buses and trains in Rome, in Venice, you have the vaporettos, which are like a water bus. So for those, you can actually pick up day passes or 2-day or 3-day passes where you can have unlimited rides, or you can buy individual tickets. And the tickets you can buy from these yellow machines. So when you come out of the train station in Venice, you'll find that there will be a line for this yellow machine. This is where you get the tickets from. And if you're staying in St. Mark's, I would probably recommend using the Vaporetto to get to your accommodation because that area is about a 25 to 30-minute walk from the train station. So if you've got, what kind of luggage are you taking? Are you taking quite large suitcases or carry-on or?
Yeah, it's going to be a larger suitcase.
Okay, so just keep that in mind. In Venice, there's a lot of bridges, there's a lot of stairs. So yeah, if you can keep it as small as possible, that's good. But you do have the vaporettos there to help you get from place to place. Works very similar to a metro where you just get on once you have a ticket, you scan it and you go through the bollards and then you're able to hop on. You can also use Google Maps to look up specific routes that will take you to places. With that, just pay attention to the name of the end destination because you'll want to get on that one and not the one going in the opposite direction.
Mm.
Because what happens is there's typically one stop and they will have so it's not like with buses where they're on opposite sides of the road. It's all on the one side and you just have ones going this way, one's going that way. So you've really got to be paying attention to which one's coming and which one's going. But they're very great for getting around in between longer distances, but otherwise Venice is very, very walkable. And there is the main area of St. Mark's, which obviously you want to experience. I would recommend visiting there either early in the morning or later in the evening when the day trippers have left. So you'll notice if you go there in the middle of the day, it is absolutely packed, crowded with people. And then to be there in the evening where it's just, you and a few other people, it's a much more relaxing experience. And then during the day, when you want to get out and explore, there's a couple of little neighborhoods that I would really recommend just going and wandering. And Venice is great for just getting lost. So my new favorite game, it took me 4 visits to Venice before I actually fell in love with it because I kept doing it wrong. And it was on my 4th visit where I started a game of if it's an empty alleyway street, walk down it and just see where it
Okay.
takes. Because you'll notice very quickly that people follow the same pathway. And that's the way that Google Maps tells you to go between the main kind of locations. But if you just take, one alleyway back, a slightly different bridge, you'll realize that there's no one in sight. The area that I really love is called the Dossodoro region. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's the University District. So there's some really lovely grand piazzas with lots of cheap but delicious restaurants, lots of beautiful little canals that are just a little bit further afield from the tourist areas. But I'll include the name of that in the document that I give you. So
Okay,
that's all.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Did you want to go inside of St. Mark's or the
Yes,
Doge's?
please.
Yeah, of course. So I can give you a tour for that one. It is definitely worth going in and seeing whilst you're there. I don't know if you know about the inside of St. Mark's is beautiful gold mosaics.
It
It'll be,
sounds stunning.
yeah, it'll be fantastic. And did you want to do the islands? Because you do have enough time if you want to, but if
Yeah,
you'd
I think I
rather,
do.
yeah,
I think I do because we're essentially going to have 2.5 days.
yeah.
Um, and it sounds like one day is plenty to wander kind of the main area. So yeah, I think I do want to try and get over to a couple of the islands.
Perfect. So in that case, I would say arrive in Venice, do your gondola ride, do your food tour. The next day, do St. Mark's Basilica, the Doge's Palace, and then have the afternoon free to just wander and explore. And And then the next day you can do the islands.
Okay.
And I think then you'll very much have done a lot of Venice. And then, yeah, so you'll be flying out of, I'm assuming, Venice Airport, correct?
No, we're taking the train from Venice to Vienna.
Oh, fantastic. Super easy. So you'll be able to get the Vaporetto back to the train station and then hop on the train straight to Vienna.
So, how far in advance, both in Rome and Venice, do I need to be there to get the train?
So typically I strive to get there between 40 to 30 minutes early. You don't have to be. But the reason why I do that is because one, I regularly encounter delays, whether it be with the bus, the train, the tram that's getting me to the actual station itself, or two, sometimes when it's your first time in a station, it can be very overwhelming trying to find where your platform is. So I always try to get there with 30 minutes is usually a good amount of time. Also, if you want to get a coffee, or if it's like an early morning train, for instance, or you want something to snack whilst you're there, then also getting there early gives you a chance. I am just always leaning on the side of better safe than sorry because I don't want to miss it, of course. Also be aware that sometimes the trains, they do switch platforms depending on how busy the station is. So just keep an eye on the boards. You may also encounter a situation where they don't announce your platform until a few minutes before it's meant to depart. That's happened to me before. So just keep an eye, and typically if you're getting very close to your departure time and you don't know your platform yet, just put yourself somewhere in the middle so that it's easy to get either way, basically. In terms of the two train stations, pickpockets, just be very, very aware, especially in Rome. And I guess the best way to be prepared for that is to just be aware. Obviously keep your belongings close to you, don't just leave your bags unattended and such. But other than that, you should be fine.
Okay. And the rolling strikes, how do we find out when and where and if we'll be affected?
So the strikes are typically announced either a few days in advance. Sometimes it can be earlier than that. There is a website that you can go to check, and I'll give you that link as well. It's always best to check just in the days coming up, a little quick Google search, any upcoming strikes that may happen. The good thing is that typically when there are train strikes, typically the main like peak hour trains will usually still go. There might still be delays, severe delays. So I had a lady who was traveling a few days ago and there was a train strike, and she was trying to get from Florence to Rome, and her train was originally meant to leave at about 10 o'clock. It didn't leave till almost 1, and there was about a 70-minute extra period of time. So when there is a strike, it can be quite disruptive, but fingers crossed it doesn't happen. In that case, there are also the options of buses. So if you do come across a strike, I would suggest knowing the alternative routes to get to places. But yeah, hopefully you don't have that.
Okay. Let's see what else. And there's no customs going from Venice to Vienna. It's just a straight run.
Yeah, so it should be. So sometimes they will do passport checks, where you'll have just some officers, either Italian or Austrian, will come onto the train. They'll just ask everyone for their passports. You won't get a stamp or anything, because obviously it's still within the EU Schengen zone. But yeah, they may just come on and inspect.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they speak English, do they?
In which locations do you mean?
The folks that may come around looking for passports.
Maybe, maybe not, but typically they'll be wearing a uniform, so you'll know, and other people will start handing over the passports. So
Okay.
it's
It'll be pretty obvious.
It'll be
Okay,
pretty
good.
obvious, and it will usually be at the station right before the border or the station right after the border. I'm not sure if it happens with Austria. I know it happens with Switzerland, because that happened to me going between Switzerland. But that could be because Switzerland is not Schengen, whereas Italy is. So it may happen, it may not. But if it does, it's very easy. Just passport check, okay, back. So no
Okay.
problem there. But yeah.
Okay. For the Vatican and St. Mark's and any other churches we go into, I understand that women need to have shoulders and knees covered. Are there any rules for men?
So typically, men knees need to be covered as well, and shoulders. That being said, you'll be there in November, so I think you should be quite okay with having the correct clothing. Men can typically get away with just above the knee, is fine as well, but definitely no very short trousers or anything like that.
Okay. And
Um,
then, sorry, continue.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you're wearing a shirt that isn't, shoulders, then I always take a scarf with me, just as like a backup, as a way to just wrap around if I need. But you'll typically be told whether you need to or not. And in some instances, you'll find that churches, for instance, the Vatican, I can't recall, but there are some churches where they give you like a sheet of plastic to put over if you're not correctly dressed. And then other churches, they don't enforce it. So it really depends. But just as a general, I guess, show of respect, go in dressed appropriately.
Okay. And do you happen to know, the hotel that we booked in Rome says it includes breakfast. What is likely to be served?
So depending on the hotel, it's typically a combination of like a Western American style breakfast. You'll have eggs, bacon, toast, these sorts of things. Whereas an Italian breakfast will typically be like a coffee and a sweet pastry, like a croissant or some kind of biscotti thing. Typically in hotels though, they will cater for everyone. So you won't have to worry about that. But if you do decide to go out searching for breakfast, you'll usually find that it will be like a bar. They call them bars, and you go in, you order at the counter, you get your coffee and typically some sort of sweet pastry on the side. And that's Italian breakfast, which takes a
Okay.
bit of getting used to if you haven't, done that before. I still prefer a savory breakfast over a sweet one.
Okay. All right. I think that was all my questions. Did you have anything else that I should have been asking about but didn't think to ask about?
No worries. I'm just going to check my notes here if there's anything else I need. Um, what time does your train depart Venice? Is it a morning, afternoon train?
Um, it'll be a morning train. I feel like they haven't. No, because we've booked an actual train. I have not made note of the times for
No
that,
problem.
but it is a morning train out of Venice.
Okay, fantastic. And just checking. No. Okay. Do you need any assistance with internet or staying connected whilst you're traveling? Do you have an international roaming plan?
We don't. We haven't looked into that yet.
Okay, no problem. I've got some resources that I can add to the document for you as well. Just because when you're out and about, it is always good to have Google Maps. Also, if you need to book any taxis, there's specific, for instance, Rome, there's a specific taxi app that you can use. And to use it, you need to be connected to the internet. So I'll send those ones through for you. Otherwise, I think I have everything I need to put together some recommendations for you. But overall, I think it's going to be a fabulous, fabulous trip. And yeah, is there something you're most looking forward to?
All of it.
All of it.
Truly all of it. I've had a friend from high school worked in Rome for a number of years. So it just sounds so lovely, and I just want to um see it, live it for a bit.
Wonderful. So in between all the sightseeing and the activities, I would say then just go explore, just wander, get lost. Especially in the evening times, they have the passeggiata where you go for a nice long walk before dinner or after dinner, as the sun's setting, and it's just a very beautiful time to people watch and just soak it all in. So I think you'll love it.
Wonderful. Oh,
Fantastic.
good.
Alrighty. So
Awesome. Thank you so much for your help, Tyla.
cool. I'll put everything together in a document for you, and I should have it to you within the next week. So just keep an eye on your inbox. And once you have that document, feel free to ask any follow-up questions. But other than that, I'm wishing you a wonderful trip to Italy with your husband for your anniversary.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Lovely.
much.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.